So in this second video, I'm going to go over in a little bit more detail how to use this for some of your common scenarios. I'll demonstrate most of this on a reduced set of data so that we can illustrate more quickly. But before I move to the demo data, let me illustrate the size of the problem on your full data, or at least the full data as I last had it. As I've mentioned in email, when a brute force approach to checking the strings, every artist on one side against every artist on the other side, entails about, I think it was 23 million comparisons. That's computationally extremely expensive. I've optimized this tool in a number of different ways to make those checks go much faster. One way I optimize is I make sure that I don't repeat the comparison for any duplicate pair. So the reason I'm telling you that is because I'm going to demonstrate to you this operation. We're going to compare artist in album CD to artist in tapes, and I've got the artist title combinations enabled for both sides as we looked at in the first video. So now if I start this new check, I want you to notice on the progress bar that my tool's reporting 3.9 million combinations found. Now what that means is of the 23-ish possible combinations or total combinations in your sheets, I was able to reduce that to only 3 million that would have to be checked by the code, and everything else could be accounted for in bookkeeping. But it's still quite a lot of processing. So in the time I've been explaining this, we're only 4% complete, comparing all those pairs. So this will take a while. This is the kind of thing you'd have to go off and make a cup of coffee and come back. Now to illustrate this, the impact of these settings on your search space, if I turn this artist title combination off for the tape side, and I only take into consideration the artist and title combination on the left side, you see there it reduced down to somewhere under 2 million, 1 point something million possible pairs. And you can see that the results are returning much more quickly. And finally, if I turn both of these settings off and we're only looking at the artist pairs without taking the context into account, this will go so fast you'll almost miss the number, but this will report at something like 614,000 pairs. So of that 23 million, only 614,000 pairs have to be inspected for us to have a full accounting of your sheet, of both of your sheets. And you can see that we're at 10% already, and this will complete much faster. This is the operation I told you that we had finishing in around 90 seconds. It might take a little longer in this final implementation because it takes extra time to display and update progress bars and to update your screen and populate the table and that sort of thing, but it's still a pretty quick operation. So I hope that's a helpful illustration to see what the kind of computational trade-offs are. This was actually quite a challenging thing to code up, and I spent quite a lot of time optimizing this so that you would get good performance for what turned out to be a very computationally demanding choice to take into consideration the artist title combinations on both sides. So now I'm going to switch from this spreadsheet to a version of this tool in which I've got abbreviated versions of your album and tapes data, just so that our illustrations will be snappier. Okay, so I've just loaded a new version of this tool that's got a reduced set of entries in each one of these sheets, album, CD, and tapes. This will allow us to look at small examples so I can explain how to get the most out of this. On this set, I have run the complete comparison between album, CD, and tapes, and I've considered the combinations on both sides, as you can see. And so just reviewing the results on this reduced set, I have this many results. It's roughly 50 lines there, and you'll notice that we have artists here with some interesting features. So we have Sugar Hill Gang, a couple different variations of spelling of Sugar Hill Gang. You can see Sugar Hill Gang with spaces, Sugar Hill Gang with no space. We have the Sugar Hill Gang with spaces, etc. And of course you see lots of Temptations. We have basically the Temptations and Temptations. And we have variations of the spelling of Angela Bofill. So as you might imagine, this was only 141,000 potential matches. If you were running millions, you would have quite a long list of results. And you may find it helpful to use these arrows here in the tops of the columns. And if you use this drop-down arrow, you can do a variety of sorting and filtering operations. I recommend you try the filtering. You can, in the search box here, I can just type sugar, and then I'll filter my results to only include items where sugar was in this column and matching something on this side. And you can see now all the variations of Sugar Hill Gang and the Sugar Hill Gang. And so this is a good way to illustrate how you can have variations within a column on a sheet. And as you said, you may want to maintain those variations, and that's fine. But to the extent possible, you might wish to make those as consistent as they should be before you start comparing across sheets. And I'll demonstrate that next. But first, let me just demonstrate one more time how you might turn your attention to all the entries on this side that have something like Temptations. So I'm just typing temp and hitting OK, and I can see all my Temptations results and filtering out the rest. So you may find that this filtering is a handy way to help navigate your results. Now, the reason I encourage that you consider doing as much cleanup within a column before you start doing cleanup between sheets is because it will reduce the amount of work you have to do. Imagine if you have to deal just with the Temptations. Here we have the Temptations and Temptations showing up on two different libraries in your album CD and many different tape titles in your tape database. And so it would reduce your work considerably if you were interested in having all of the instances, say, of Temptations be the Temptations. If you wanted that correction made, instead of making it on an album, considering it on an album by album basis, you might wish to have this cleaned up first. So let me show you how that would look. If I change my operation to check for the artist in album CD and compare it to itself and rerun this check, you'll notice that the tool will automatically turn off checking the artist title combinations, because that's not relevant when you're checking within a sheet. And you see now in our little reduced set we have Sugar Hill Gang and Temptations showing up with these different variations. Now let's just suppose that in the case of Temptations, this is a relatively simple determination. We want all the instances of the Temptations in the album CD database to say the Temptations and not Temptations, in which case we can just say we want to change to match the left. That's easy. Now with Sugar Hill Gang, let's suppose that you have, in fact, let's not even change that yet, because I want to demonstrate what this will look like if we play with Sugar Hill Gang first. I looked up Sugar Hill Gang, and I noticed online that the official name of the band is the Sugar Hill Gang with no space. Now, maybe it's correct to have it listed in catalogs as just Sugar Hill Gang, that's fine. But suppose you wanted it to say the Sugar Hill Gang. Well, you can change that manually here. You can go into this field and add the extra word or any other spelling change that you want to make. And then if you say you want to replace with the left, instances of Sugar Hill Gang looking like this in the album CD will be replaced with the Sugar Hill Gang. And let me show you. I'll click Make Corrections, and you'll notice 2 corrections were made. But remember, you also had instances of Sugar Hill Gang, one word, but without the. So if I rerun this check, we should see this show up again. And indeed we do. Here's Sugar Hill Gang matching the Sugar Hill Gang. So one more time, you would have to indicate to the tool that you want to finish making the replacement from this to this. So in this case we'll say we want to use the value on the right, and here let's go ahead and make our change to temptations. We'll use the value on the left, and if I click make corrections, we'll see that 2 instances of Sugar Hill Gang were made consistent and 37 instances of temptations were made consistent. Now we can check and prove that this is so by rerunning our checks, and we see nothing shows up, so we're clean. Here's a little opportunity to demonstrate how you might relax your threshold and get maybe other match candidates, and nothing shows up at 0.6. At 0.5 we get some candidates, but nothing here is a match, right? So the Nick Straker band matches the Steve Miller band because it's the something start with an S band, and here we have Wilson and Wilson with some other characters in common, but they're not the same. They're not a match for you to be interested in. But you can see how relaxing your threshold would give you an additional, more detailed look at your list. So of course we won't do anything with that, but I'm going to return your threshold to 0.7. I think we like working there for this example. And now I'm going to go back to conducting your check between artist and album CD and artist and tapes, and let's make that check. So you'll see here that this gets done pretty quickly. Oh, because we didn't turn on the checking the artist and title combinations. So let me turn those on, and I'll turn them on for both sides. And this will be a larger search space. It'll say 141,000 or something. There it is. And I'll pause here while this completes. Okay, this is finishing up, and that took about 30 seconds. I spared you the boredom of watching the bar. And now as I scan these results, you see that we have roughly the same number of candidate matches here for us to consider between what was in artist and what was in tapes. But notice that because we regularized Sugar Hill Gang and Temptations, now if we look at our results for Temptations, where we had a lot of returns, you notice that everything in album CD has a nice, clean, consistent title. And if I wish to change the Temptations in tapes to the Temptations here, I could do so by just designating all of these as left-hand side. So here's a good opportunity to show you a shortcut for how to make these changes. As we saw before, there's a little drop down here where you can select which operation you want to do. If I want this operation for all of these rows that I've filtered on, I can change one, and then you see this little green box, and there's a little square at the bottom right hand side of that green box. This is just an Excel feature. If I grab that little handle, when I hover over it, it turns into a plus sign. I mouse down with my left mouse button and drag and let go, and everything fills in to match that item. So that's worth exploring and playing with, see if you're comfortable using that operation. So if I want all of these to be changed to what's on the left, that will be done when I say make corrections. I'm going to undo this filter and continue to explore our list. Maybe now without filtering I can take a look and see that we have Sugar Hill Gang and Sugar Hill Gang, 2 different variations. I'm going to use the left hand side for that. I want to go to this authoritative one. I'm going to go down and take a look at Angela Bofill. So this is an interesting one to me. If I remember correctly, when I looked this up, I think the correct spelling of Angela Bofill was with 1 L. Nope, just looked it up. It's 2 L's. So again, our left-hand side is authoritative, and so we can go ahead and change this to the left-hand side in every case. Same thing with Sugar Hill Gang as we saw at the top, right? So if I want to just clean up my view here, I can put sugar, filter down, the Sugar Hill gang. Yeah, let's make all the rest of these the left side too. This works going up as well. See? And so when you're doing your work, you might say, you know, I've audited enough of this. I'm not finished, but I've done enough for now. I'm going to make these changes. So I can make these corrections. And so anywhere where I didn't skip, you can see the number of corrections that were made. Now, some of these say 0, and I'm not sure why that is, other than maybe we had performed them before. So everything's reporting 0. So now if I rerun the check, we'll see how our results change. Okay, I just reran that, and as you can see, all the Temptations and Temptations and Sugar Hill and Bowfill, they're all gone, and now I can take a look at the remaining matches and continue in this way to gradually work through my list. And again, I want to remind you we're working with a reduced set of results here, and so on an even bigger set of results, you may find it handy to use the tool in this gradual manner, where you work on a piece until you get tired of doing it, and then you come back to it another time and continue your work until you get everything sorted the way you want it. Okay, so that's it for a pretty thorough overview of how you can work with the tool. In the next and final video, I'm going to go over other variations of ways you can use this and some tips and nuances for getting the most out of the tool.